Hello, and welcome back to the Talent Pieces podcast. I'm your host, Carlos Delcid. And here, we talk all about talent and culture for entrepreneurs, startup founders, and business leaders looking to scale their companies effectively. If you find today's session helpful, don't forget to share it with fellow entrepreneurs and follow the Talent Pieces podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. All right, so thank you everyone for joining to our podcast one more time. Today we have Allyson Eman, CEO of Venture Atlanta. Allyson, it's great to have you here. It's always a great conversation with you.
Thanks for hosting me, Carlos.
So, Allyson, I really wanted to start, this conversation just sharing with the audience who is Allyson Eman and how Venture Atlanta started and how it grew to a point where last year we have Robert from Shark Tank as a keynote speaker.
We've had some amazing speakers that we'll talk about, Carlos. So you're right. Venture Atlanta started 17 years ago. So it really started with the premise of that we needed more capital in Atlanta. So there was only a handful of investment funds here, Nora Mosley Partners, Fulcrum Equity Partners, and a handful of others. That wasn't enough to sustain, you know. So you obviously have Georgia Tech and Morehouse and Spelman and Emory and all this great talent that's growing. And then these kids went to start companies. There wasn't the talent, there wasn't the capital to infuse into their companies. So the Metro Atlanta Chamber and TAG and the Atlanta CEO Council kind of came together and said, you know what, we can form an organization and we will see if we could, put on a conference. And Alan Mosley with Nora Mosley Partners worked with John Yates, and they put all the stuff together, and they found me. So I was very lucky. My best friend actually worked at Nora Mosley at the time. And, the funny thing that I tell people all the time is you don't have to check all the boxes and think it's the perfect job for you. I had no experience running a nonprofit in venture capital or in tech. So would you have thought I was the right person for the job? Probably not. But I knew marketing. I knew events. I had a big personality. I definitely had helped build other things. I had just been with a mortgage company that we scaled from 8 people to 800, 30 offices nationwide. Wow. So had definitely, done some good stuff. But Venture Atlanta really started, as a small local Georgia conference to really help infuse some capital here in Atlanta. And, the first year, maybe we had, I think, 20 funds that came in from out of town. Last year we had 500,
Wow.
So the scale total, but the scale has just grown, immensely. And I think as the years continued, we said, we kind of have something here. So instead of just looking at it as a local Georgia conference, what can we do? Can we expand it across the Southeast? And we've been very deliberate that, hey, we don't want to be, say every company from New York and Boston and California can apply to be a part of the, conference, because there's plenty of capital there, right?
Absolutely.
So we want to service the companies in Texas and Mississippi and Arkansas and Kentucky, Tennessee, the Carolinas, Maryland, Virginia, Florida, and Georgia. And, so it's really a nice, wide Southeast footprint. Again, we go all the way over to Texas, up to Maryland and DC, down to Florida and over. So it's kind of this right triangle, like 15 states. But because of that, then venture capitalists are like, okay, if I'm going to come to the East Coast, I'm going to come there because I'm going to see 85 to 90 companies, that they've pre-selected. I'm going to see hundreds more entrepreneurs that I can talk to, and I'm also going to see my peers. Right. So, VCs want to collaborate with each other as well, to do deals with each other and to partner. So, over time, it just kind of kept getting larger, and the conference. Really, we hold ourselves to a very high caliber. I mean, it's a very first-class conference, and you got to have good speakers there as well. So, last year we had Robert from Shark Tank, who was our third Shark Tank member.
Wow.
We had Mark Cuban and Lori Grenier as well.
Wow, that's a great audience, and definitely talks about the value of the conference. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's the biggest venture conference in the Southeast these days, right?
Oh, yeah, by far.
How can you talk about those numbers of how many companies you've supported and how much capital they've raised through Venture Atlanta?
Yeah. So we have, I think at this point, close to 850 alumni companies in our 17 years. They've raised over $7.7 billion, with close to
Billions
8
with
billion.
B.
That was a B.
Let's make sure we remember billions.
And close to 18 billion in exits.
Wow.
So, companies like SalesLoft and Roadie and Park Mobile and, Julex, and there's so many others, Terminus, Cabbage, Cloud Sherpa, Silverpop, just tons of great companies that have graced our stage. And, I tell people all the time, they're like, well, what company, would I've heard of? And I'm like, well, have you ever parked your car? I mean, Park Mobile, literally when they started on our stage, was an unknown name, and Sharif Uzel was the CEO at the time, and was okay. We could do parking, by having signs and whatever, and it took a while to catch on, but that completely started at our conference.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know how to park my car these days if there wouldn't be a QR code around the city.
Right.
I don't carry quarters like in the old days where you had to park, and that talks about innovation. Right. And I think Venture Atlanta, it's a lot about innovation. You were mentioning, if you can summarize Venture Atlanta in one topic for this year specifically, aside from innovation, it's the team collaboration. And that talks about your keynote speaker for the year.
Yeah. So leadership and performance. I mean, that's like kind of our big thing. So Dawn Staley, who is a 3-time, national champion coach for University of South Carolina Gamecocks. And, she's a dynamo. She's just an amazing lady. She has had incredible accolades in her career with UVA, with University of South Carolina. She was the head coach for the Olympic team. She was there this year on the sidelines, I think, cheering on the women. And obviously we know they won as well. But she just has an incredible message. And, it's so relevant, the player-coach relationship, right, and the entrepreneur-VC relationship, because you have to be a partnership. You have to rely on each other. You have to help each other. Players rely on their coaches to lift them up and bring them, to a different level, just like the entrepreneurs are relying on the VCs that they partner with to help them grow their companies. So, we really looked at who would be someone that would inspire our audience. And we really look at who can we bring to the table that's going to be inspirational, that's going to provide education, that's going to provide innovation. So, sometimes everyone doesn't check every box. Right. I think she will definitely have a little more of an inspirational message than maybe some others. But like Robert last year, he was fantastic. I mean, there's been so many good ones. But, I remember years ago we had Alan DeBerry, who was the CEO of VMware at the time. I might be quoting that wrong, but it's Alan DeBerry, and he was amazing. And I remember the entrepreneurs were sitting in the audience taking notes. And a couple of them were like, I learned so much. Oh my God. Like there are tactical things that I can go home with this year. And there's actually some really cool things that we're doing this year. So don't forget to ask me about some of the new things that we're doing for entrepreneurs.
Oh, absolutely. And, just want to share something on my side. I remember last year when I saw Robert on stage. Yeah, last year was my first Venture Atlanta in person. Yeah. So I see Robert, and I just as you said, I started taking like all this valuable content that he was throwing out there. And then I remember texting my team like, yo, we got to be a sponsor here next year. I don't know how we're going to do it, who we have to talk to, but let's do it. Like, this is great. And then right after, we had an intro, I met you and I was like, yep. You don't have to tell me anything. I want to be a sponsor.
Like, and you were awesome. I remember we were, and it's so funny because there's so many people at the conference I don't get to talk to, and everyone's always like, "Oh, I'll meet you at Venture Atlanta." I'm like, "No, please,
no, you won't.
You're not going to." I'm like kind of always running around, but the thing is, I actually did enjoy that last year. I got to have some more conversations, and I remember us taking selfies, and you were like, "All right, I want to talk to you," and and it was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, thank you. And that talks about something that I wanted to cover with you, which is Venture Atlanta. The core team is very small, but then you get a lot of support coming from sponsors and partners.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because from a logistics perspective, that's like, wow, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of logistics. It's more than 2 days of events. And it's more than, I think last year, was it 1,500 attendees?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Wow. So tell me a little bit more about that. What's the role of your team? What's the role of your sponsors and partners?
Yeah. So I have a small and mighty team. So basically we have, and the awesome thing is a lot of my team has been with me for a long time. So APG, which is Association of Planners of Georgia, Susan Ginsburg has really been my right hand for 17 years. And she and her team are the ones that are sitting at registration, and they're running things, and they're helping with the mobile app and the logistics. And, each year there's new challenges. This year Woodruff has some construction going on, and you will see that there's a large tent outside, and there's going to be several programs in the tent outside. And believe it or not, like, you kind of have a vision and go, oh, we'll add a tent. Well, adding a tent is, wow, a lot,
Oh, I bet.
Just a lot, between permits and load-ins and all sorts of different stuff. So, need that team to help. And then we've got an incredible marketing team. MarketWake has been our marketing partner for years, for 7 years. They are fantastic. I mean, I truly, every time we set goals, I mean, we just sit there and wait to exceed things. And, knock on wood, we've been exceeding them every year. And then PulseSpark, who does our audiovisual, again, like, all three of those companies are women-led, companies. And as a female CEO, like, I love supporting other women and helping other women. But,
girl power, yes.
Girl power, yeah. But we truly could not do this conference without our sponsors and supporters. So this year we have 105 sponsors, I think. So Wow. It's a lot. But we are a 501c6 nonprofit. So we cannot do this without sponsors and supporters. And obviously how we put on this conference is through sponsorships and through attendees, paying for their tickets. But, all those 850 alumni that I referenced before, none of them paid to be a part of Venture Atlanta. None of them paid to get on stage. None of them paid to have 20 and 30 meetings with investors. None of them paid to get their term sheets. Nor did they pay us anything, so it's not like we're taking a piece of all these companies. Boy, I kind of wish no, but
it would have been a good business, let me tell you.
But you think about it, the model from the beginning was never going to be a pay to play. It was never, it was always just going to be about supporting entrepreneurs. So so I definitely, anyone listening, would encourage you to look at our sponsor list and work with these companies, because they're incredible. They're the ones that are supporting the technology industry, supporting entrepreneurs across the Southeast, and we can't do it without them.
Absolutely. If you go for that list, look for Puzzle. Just saying. By the way, I want to go back to something that you were saying before, which is related to the keynote speaker and how the team has this great relation with the coach, the same way that the startup and its CEO needs to have a great relation with the venture capital. And that's where I feel finding the right venture capital firm is not just who's going to put the money in your business,
Right.
but who's going to help you give that great direction.
Oh, absolutely.
into your business. So what advice will you give to founders looking for venture capital, looking to be in the conference? What's the readiness advice for them?
Yeah. So, a lot of it, first of all, if you're attending the conference, if you have your ticket, if you're attending the conference, everyone who is attending the conference is going to get a list of all the attendees. Everyone has access to our mobile app that has all the attendees in there. Do your homework. I tell everyone all the time, do you want to be successful at Venture
Yes.
Atlanta? Do your homework. And the entrepreneurs that get the meetings, that meet with all, that, really get in front of the investors, they've done their homework. They see that they're not reaching out to a growth stage, investor who only does healthcare, and they're a supply chain company that's looking for $1 million. Like, that's going to be a waste of the investor's time. So make sure you're a match. Make sure you're the right
fit.
person, because they want to take meetings. I mean, the investors truly do come to the conference to meet with people, but sometimes the entrepreneurs will email me and go, well, I reached out to 6 investors and they didn't reply back. Okay, I cannot control that, people. I can't control everything. But, you potentially, if you get a term sheet, you could be in partnership with a venture capitalist for 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, right? A lot of times they'll sit on your board. They need to be the right partner for you, just like your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend or
Yes.
whatever the case may be. You want the right partner. You want someone that you enjoy spending time with. You, again, like your team, you want someone that's going to lift you up, but you want, everyone's probably watched Shark Tank, and whenever someone comes to the table, you kind of know who Lori Grenier is going to go after, or who wants Lori
Yes.
Grenier, because they want to be on QVC, and they have a consumer product, and she's the one that can get them there. Or, Robert's expertise was in cybersecurity, so something with that, or Barbara Corcoran, was in real estate or whatever. So you want the right partner, and a lot of
Yes.
times they would sit there and go, I'm not the right person for you, and then they go, I'm out. Like, But they're saying that not because they don't like your company. They're saying that because they're not the right person
they cannot
for
add
you.
value
Right.
to what you're
Right.
aside from and this is another thing that I think it's great clarifying for companies that are looking for capital. It's not just the money, it's where it comes from.
Right.
Because at the end, it's not how they're going to deploy that capital, but also how within their network or portfolio companies they can add value to what you're building by partnering, by putting you in the right room, opening the right conversations beyond the money that it's put into
Yeah, you want them to help you open the doors. I mean, when we put people on our board, I want them to add value to the board. I want, is it someone who has great connectivity to speakers? Do they have good connectivity to help recruit other investors to attend? We're not going to just put someone on the board because they want to be on the board. I mean, it's a working board and they have to add value, to your point.
Hey there, quick break. If you're enjoying today's conversation, don't forget to hit subscribe and give us those 5 stars. It will help us grow a lot. Now, back to our conversation. Okay, so what needs to be, aside from companies that want to be ready for next year for Venture Atlanta, aside from attending this year, which I think it's a great opportunity to learn the concept and everything, but what other things they need to have ready? Because again, in the Startup Wars, there's different stages. In what stage they need to be to a point where, hey, they can call your attention when submitting an application. I think we got like 800 applications this year, 600?
650.
650. That's a huge number.
It was a huge number. And it was a 15% jump from the year before, which was a 15% jump from the year before that. So like the year over year, growth has been a lot. But, that's a great point. Obviously, we've got our applications open. They'll open next May for the conference next October, which we haven't announced our date yet, but we will soon.
Coming soon.
For 2025. But, because we get so many applications, your application's got to be strong. It's got to be tight. There's got to be a big problem that you're solving, but also why are you the right company? Why is it the right team? We have on the application, give us your one sentence, give us your elevator pitch kind of thing. If that is kind of a dud, it's like people are going to move on. You've got to grab our attention. You've got to sell us.
The videos.
I mean, yeah, you got it. But a lot of people don't do that. We don't make it, when we made it mandatory, people balked at it, so then we don't make it mandatory, but we also do like a pitch off that we've done every year we take like 40 early stage companies and narrow it down to 20. And there were some companies that did a great job and some that didn't, and maybe we thought it was a great company, but then once we saw them pitch, we were like, okay, not as good. The other thing too is that we do take companies from every state, or we try to take companies from every single state. So, we're not going to take 80 companies from Florida or 80 companies from Tennessee. Like, we're definitely going to spread the love. Exactly. And we also, Carlos, diversity is very important to Venture Atlanta. And, I would highly encourage, especially women, apply. Unfortunately, women feel like, their application or their company has to be at a perfect state to raise capital. Or, if maybe they're not raising capital in October, that it's not the right time for them. What you have to look at is Venture Atlanta is an opportunity to put your company on the map, to get a bunch of exposure. And you can get on stage and say, I'm going to raise money in the next year. It doesn't have to be in October. So there's so many things that people are, if it's not like this, it's not gonna work. But you want to build those relationships, that you have this pipeline. I remember Greg McGraw from Max Stadium, years ago, he pitched, and he met Summit Partners from Boston at one of the conferences. And it took like they had that conversation, and he ended up doing a deal with them, but years later. But he was so thrilled that he had that conversation at Venture Atlanta.
Right. I think that speaks about the long-term value of the conference beyond the 2 days of conference. Right. Because I think sometimes, it's not Shark Tank. You're not going to get the check on the spot.
Right.
There's due diligence. There's a process to follow. But it will open conversations for you, for the right venture capital partner, for, maybe a co-founder, or maybe the right talent for your team.
Right.
Maybe for, advisors. So what can you tell to people about that long-term value that they can get out of the conference?
Yeah. So, again, we work really hard on this conference book. So we've got this book. I mean, y'all, I put in a lot of time on this
Yes.
thing. And in 2020, I was like, okay, we're going virtual. I'm never doing this book again. I don't have to do this book. It's virtual. We'll do like a little thing. And so the next year, I remember in 2021, I told the board, I was like, you know what? I was like, we're just gonna bag that. And they were like, no. They were like, everyone looks at that. It has shelf life. People keep it on their shelves for years.
I have my 2023
right?
book, yes.
Because and you will keep your 2024, which I just approved today at the printer.
Awesome.
But the thing is like, it's those things. So people go back through and go, oh, you know what? I'm going to follow up with that company, or I made a note about that company. And as much as we're a technology conference, the investors sit and take notes on them and look at everything.
I have my notes in the book, yes.
And you've got your notes. So there's companies that you're going to go, you know what? Maybe they weren't ready last year, but this year, maybe they're ready for my services. So I'm going to go back and call them. So there's that. But, your point about, we say all the time, Venture Atlanta is not just about connecting companies with capital. Well, that's really our mission statement. That's the core of core of Venture Atlanta. But it's so much more, right? So, I have close to 100 students signed up for Venture Atlanta. Why are they there? They're looking for their companies, or they're interested in venture capital, or they're interested in tech. But these are some incredible kids from Duke, from Stetson University, from Davidson, from Emory, from Georgia Tech. I mean, Duke literally brings a bus of kids down, and they have the last 2 years. Stetson brings a bus of kids up from Florida, so they want to expose their students to what Venture Atlanta has to offer, but then also, again, looking for customers. I mean, that's just huge. You think there's so many of our tech companies where I'm like, everyone at the conference is your customer, is your potential customer. You don't necessarily just have to focus on the investors. And it's funny, we have a prep call this afternoon with all of our companies, and Mike Dowdle with Circadian Ventures, he works, here in Tech Village, and he's also on our board. He's also been an incredible partner of Venture Atlantis for years. And, he's doing a session on how to make the most of Venture Atlanta for our selected companies, because they're always so focused on the investors. Talk to the service providers, have them, you make connections for everybody, have DLA Piper, have Allie Merritt, have all the people that are around, in the ecosystem make connections for you, and really look at everything that's available at Venture Atlanta. There's, breakfast events for our founders that, Rob Foreman, God, my brain, Rob Foreman and Eric Spett, they're alumni. They formed a company called Scalebound, and they're going to actually talk at Venture Atlanta at a breakfast about really how to scale your company. And they're advising founders. So, we've got a great and incredible investor and entrepreneur breakfast both days, one on day one with investors, one on day two that's just for founders. But look at all of the opportunities that we have available this year. We also have, I know you didn't ask this, but I'm going to throw it out there. We also have these executive sessions that we're doing this year. So we brought in 4 high-level senior C-suite execs that have sold companies, scaled companies, done incredible things. And they're going to be doing some really small 20-person sessions with companies, and they're literally we're sending out invitations. You have to be RSVP'd, you have to be checked in, and those companies are going to learn so much. They're going to be sitting and taking notes and leaving with tactical advice, tactical information to help their companies.
You were talking, or you were putting a great point there, and I was talking with Mike and with Ali some days ago about. That speaks about the conference, but also the Atlanta ecosystem overall, in how we're always looking to help. How do we strategize to better support these companies, right? And I think that's also a great opportunity. There were so many people last year in the conference that for this year, I told my team, okay, y'all are coming to Atlanta for the conference. I need to multiply Carlos by 5. So you're going to see more people from Puzzle during the conference about, alumni companies. 800, how many alumni did you say?
Close to 850.
Close to 850. And I'm sure there's a lot of stories that come to mind to you, but anything that you want to highlight of how these alumni companies have had a turning point after attending to Venture Atlanta?
Yeah, Carlos, there's so many stories, right? So, it's funny. Last year I went to an event in Raleigh, North Carolina, a market that I really haven't spent a lot of time with. And I was sitting at an event and I had at least 5 alumni companies come up to me going, oh my God, Allyson, we had the best time at Venture Atlanta. Oh, and by the way, there was a company that were like, we went Silicon Road, ventures there, and we met this person and we did this, so I hear those all the time, but there's one story that's my favorite and I tell it all the time, but it's just a fun story. So Car 360, Bruno Francois was one of our companies years ago, and he pitched on stage at Venture Atlanta. And the next year he came back because they were looking for someone to really step in that CEO role. And they ended up hiring, connecting with John Hanger. And funny story is John Hanger was also an alumni at Venture Atlanta. He had a company called Contact at Once that he presented Venture Atlanta. So you got 2 alumni, they're together, they're building their company, great, good. Well, Ernie Garcia from Carvana was our keynote speaker. And Mark Cuban was also one of our keynote speakers, great speakers. And Bruno had texted me, can I please come to the conference? And, like so many entrepreneurs do, oops, I forgot to buy a ticket. Oops, Allyson, can't you please help me? And the oops, Allyson are the nonstops, till 10 o'clock at night. So I told Bruno, I said, hey, it's standing room only right now. Can't guarantee you're going to get a seat or eat lunch, but sure, you could come, right? So he comes to the conference and he said, I just want to meet Ernie Garcia. And I was like, well, I can't guarantee you can meet Ernie Garcia. And I guess he and his wife had their own plan because they stalked him at the bathroom. And, this is a true story. So I guess he got off stage and went to the bathroom, and they connected with him, and they basically said that, this is our technology, and they wanted to show it to him. And Ernie Garcia ended up buying their company. So, wow. It was just such a fun, story. And it was funny because I remember after the transaction happened, they called me and they said, we want to take you out for a nice lunch and thank you. And I was like, wait, what happened? And they were like, if you wouldn't have let us in that day, our whole lives would be different. And I was just like, oh my God.
Find a way or make a way.
Yeah, it was funny. I was at one of the alumni dinner or one of the investor dinners a couple of years ago. And I remember one of the entrepreneurs coming up to me, and it was a woman, and she just gave me a big hug. And I was like, what was that for? And she said, do you realize how many lives that you've changed? Do you realize how many entrepreneurs you've helped? How many people,
yes.
And I don't really look at it that way. I kind of am like, oh, I run this conference, but I guess I really have,
It's very meaningful. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, how do you feel? And that builds, the culture of the conference, the spirit that is built. How do you think cultural influence, or the company culture, the conference culture, the culture that the venture capital firms that are partners bring to the conference, and how is that relevant for companies to scale?
Yeah. So, I think company culture is so important. I think I've seen, I quote all the time, I think Kyle Porter, no one did it better. What he did with Sales Loft, his culture was just incredible. And people, I think, you hear people say they're lofters for life or whatever, because
I've heard Ali say that.
Right. Yeah. I've heard Ali say that, and Tammy McQueen and Jordan Arrighetti. Because they just had so much passion. I worked for a company called South Star Funding, and same thing. Our retention rate was like 98%.
Wow.
So, and it was all focused on building a company culture. So I think it's super important, but it's the same thing I do with, I told you, my small and mighty team. I make sure that I thank them all the time. I make sure they know how appreciated they are. I always, after the conference, write personal notes to every single one of my board members. I write personal notes to every one of my team members and take them to dinner. And, my board members will say, they're like, I save your notes. Like David Hartnett has been on our board for 17 years. He just retired, but he was like, I have all my Allyson, handwritten notes. And so it's those little things that, can make a difference. So, again, when you're looking at who you're partnering with, whether the investor or who you're hiring, you have to make sure that they fit into that culture.
Yes.
Do they have the same values? Do they have the same drive? Do they have the same, everyone that I've worked with, my team knows I expect a lot. I know I can, I know I expect a lot, but there's a reason why Venture Atlanta is the way it is.
Yes.
There's a reason why, sponsors want to be there and investors want to be there and people want to be there, is because of the bar that has been, set with it. We don't, it's not a free ticket. It's not everyone come for free. It's different. And, that's what's exciting. And, I've gone to other conferences and I'm like, okay, we're doing something right, and
Yes.
and there's incredible conferences all over the country, and many of them we partner with, and we love our friends at the Florida Venture Forum and CED and some of the other markets, but I still think we're doing things just a little different.
Yeah, it's funny because every time that I hear the term "you get what you pay," we're talking about cheap. But in this case, we're talking about the real value that you can get from the conference, and what's that impressive outcome that you can get, right? Now, just to close, you were talking about some new stuffs, and I know you already talked about some of that during our conversation, but what can people expect for 2024 Venture Atlanta?
So again, you're gonna see a big old tent outside. So this big white tent is gonna be super fun. Lights and greenery in there. But we're gonna have a big investor entrepreneur breakfast there. We have a VIP sponsor lunch, so you'll be there,
I'm ready.
Interacting with everybody. A little better food, a little better atmosphere. And then our investor dinner is going to be out there, so it's just going to be spectacular. And everyone say some prayers, but right now the weather's looking pretty good.
Yes.
You open the tent under the stars, got some music playing, so it should be
Sweet.
Should be super fun. And then we've got a founders breakfast, and then we're also partnering with Techstars. So they're actually going to have, as soon as our keynote ends, everyone goes outside, and we're having a big block party outside in the tent with literally giant Jenga and cornhole and a band playing and a bar, and it's just going to be super fun. And then after you have that, you go watch demo day, so you get to see some more companies. So, great opportunity for every Venture Atlanta ticket holder gets, access to Techstars as well. So that's pretty fun. Other things is we focus so much on the networking of Venture Atlanta. So, the content, I wouldn't say content is king at Venture Atlanta. The networking is king at Venture Atlanta. And the name tags are, all of us sit there and look around and go, okay, everyone doesn't want business cards anymore. Although I actually ordered business cards this year because it was amazing how many people asked me for cards.
Oh, you just remind me of ordering mine.
It's just crazy. So I did order some, so I'll bring some. But anyway, on the name tags, we actually partnered with Link, which is one of our growth stage companies that's pitching this year out of Birmingham. And you'll be able to just scan the name badge, and then the person's contact information is going to go into your phone. You save it. And after the conference, you're actually going to get an Excel doc saying, these are who you met at Venture Atlanta, who you scanned in. But the cool thing about that is you could really look at it and go, oh my God, that's right. This is the conversation I had with Carlos. This is the conversation.
Right.
I mean, for me, I can't tell you how many people will come up to me and go, maybe they'll want to talk about sponsoring, or maybe they'll want to talk about something, and I forget who they are. So at least this time I can, I remember you and I talking, but there were several people I talked to last year, but I don't know if I followed up with or not. So at least this year, I know, I'm going to literally go, hey, let me scan your name tag to make sure I've got you. And then they're going to get a printout of everything. But we also have, like I said, these executive sessions in the Delta Lounge that we've been filling up. We've got 2 incredible thought leadership sessions that Wellstar's doing an incredible session, and JP Morgan's doing a session. Joey Womack's hosting something on that Goody Nation's doing on mental health for founders. And again, these are smaller conversations, but things that we're trying to, just again, give people more opportunities to connect. We've got a great women in capital breakfast again. And we also have our female founders dinner again at Invesco. And we had that last year. I mean, it was probably one of the most fun things I've had. I mean, last year it was standing room only. I mean, literally women left, incredibly inspired. And we've got that closing out things again.
That's awesome. I'm very much looking forward to it.
It's going to be exhausting.
It's going to be exhausting, but hey, let's get the best out of it, right? So, Allyson, thank you very much for joining us today. I know you're been in a very busy agenda these days, so I appreciate you making the time for this
Absolutely,
conversation.
Carlos, and thank you for supporting us this year.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. And that's it for today's session. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to hit subscribe and follow the Talent Pieces podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You will help us grow by sharing this podcast with fellow founders and entrepreneurs. If you have any questions or topics that you would like us to cover, feel free to leave them in the comments.